Welcome back to the Cyber Executive Podcast. We are here at the GPSEC at St. Louis, hosted by GuidePoint Security, and I have my good friend Brian Lourie here with me today. Brian, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Excited to be here.
Yeah, glad to finally get you on air and everything. So, one of the things that we were kind of talking about was leadership under pressure during an incident and everything. And, obviously, things are tense when that happens, and, being calm and cool at the top is always important. So kind of what's your thoughts on that?
Well, having the unfortunate pleasure of being through several incidents and events, I'll sum it up this way, Mark. A lot of how your business will react depends upon how your senior leadership is reacting to the situation, especially the most senior person. If they're calm and collective, have everything under control, running the playbook, that reflects upon their plus ones and ultimately reflects, to everybody underneath, just raises that level of confidence and comfort that we know what we're doing. We're not surprising. We're surprised. The other scenario is, and I've seen this happen, is when the leadership turns and goes, "Oh, dear God," or "Oh, goodness, what do we do?" That's when things start to kind of fall apart, because at that point, everybody's looking for somebody to step up, but the person everybody's looking to is somewhat defaulted that accountability, if you will, to their plus ones, or they're looking for somebody else. So in my perspective is everybody looks upward to the top of the food chain, whoever that might be, and their reaction is critical to how their leadership is going to react. And that spreads downward to, the masses, if you will. I think that's kind of the best way I could kind of sum that up.
Yeah, and I think that's where the importance of your tabletop exercises, and at least annually having top leadership involved in those conversations, and to be part of that, as well as the business, and not just the cyber or tech teams, or others that kind of handles that lower level incident response. It's important that everyone has at least some sort of aspect of what could happen, even if it's going to pivot, because of each incident's going to be different no matter what.
Absolutely spot on comment. Things are different. You have to understand, what's going to happen. Having done something recently, the term fog of war was used during a actual tabletop exercise, actually using the COM format to help the leadership process the incident. There's a lot of things that happen during the fog of war. A lot of information is being fed to leadership. Some of it's of value, some of it is noise, some of it could be potential red herrings based on this scenario of the event itself. So I think that's, critical to, kind of pay attention to. If you haven't practiced, you're going to be running around because you don't know, you're not used to, you don't have that muscle memory built up. It's new. You're looking at the playbook going, what's my next step? What's my next step? The other thing that I think, as I saw in a recent exercise, that gets lost when you do these tabletops is the information that you're getting is coming from people from the field who are actually out being impacted and being fed to leadership, who may or may not all be sitting in the same room. You might be geographically, on a Teams call, remote. Are you receiving information from people you expect it to come from?
Right.
Or more importantly, is it not coming from people that you expect? So, if you have something happening in the factory, are you hearing from your factory director? Because if you're not, that might be an issue. Or maybe he's calling the wrong person because he's not involved. So to the point you mentioned, when you do these tabletop exercises, it just can't include always the top of the food chain. It's got to include the other people that might be impacted out in the field at whatever level. They're going to see it first, more than likely, before you. They're not going to understand necessarily what they're saying. But as they escalate it through, you have, your escalation process for incidences. So it might be at a local regional incident process before it ever escalates up to an enterprise-wide one.
Yeah.
So, if you don't test those processes in tabletops, they're not used to it. They don't know, why am I seeing this information? Or why am I not seeing this information from who I expect it to be? So to your point, yeah, if you know, it's like a sports analogy. If you don't practice, you're never going to get good at it. And the more you practice, I won't say the easier it becomes, but your expectation of your actions become more anticipated. You'll react faster via expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good time to set expectations of what could occur in a live environment, or in a live event. One of in a tabletop I had last year with some of the business leaders, they didn't even consider the fact that during a ransomware attack, I might have to shut down the entire business until I know what's clean. And they were, flabbergasted by it. They're like, what do you mean? You mean everything's down? Yeah, potentially till I know where things are to keep things from spreading, so you never know where that falls at off of there. And, making sure those expectations could be there that, worst case, this might have to happen in order to keep the business going in the long term. So.
Yeah, I mean, those are tough scenarios to plan for, is that, you anticipate an incident might be localized or geographic, but, with the way we're spread out in the world and all the net connectivity that we have in businesses, I mean, the right thing can spread just as easily through everything you have as much as that single system.
Absolutely.
It's the reaction times these days. It's tough, flat networks, bad, endpoint protection, trust, comes into play, in certain environments. Do you have one-way trust?
Mm-hmm.
Lack of trust can help limit those. I mean, there's a lot of variables that come in and set, and you raise the point of, even when you think you're good, you still have to validate that you've cleaned up the situation itself.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that people tend to go reactionary to restoration really quick. And you have to be careful that you're not restoring back into the environment that's still at risk.
Right. Absolutely.
And I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
In essence, you're just self-feeding the ransomware more new clean clients to self-propagate out to. So, and again, that comes down to some of the testing that you just need to do, with that tabletop testing of, am I seeing the right things being restored in the proper time? Which comes down to, again, the reason you plan is you're not going to recover everything everywhere all at once.
Right.
You need to focus on what's immediate needs to your business. It might be piecemeal, part of an application, part of SaaS, part of this, part of that.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to know what and when. And to your point, you don't want to restore into a non-clean environment.
Right.
That's tough. And how do you validate that?
Yeah. And the other challenge too is you might have in your recovery procedure certain tiers, but okay, within that tier, what's the priority within that tier? So yeah, you have your tier 1 and you have these 10 applications that's important to tier 1, but is there one more important than the other that you need to prioritize? And sometimes that gets lost too in a business continuity planning.
But, that's a great question to ask, because you're right. People tend to look at a tier as a whole entity itself, but they tend to not lose the focus that somebody's still number 1 on that list.
Right.
And, the problem is who's ever number 10 on the list, or let's be more blunt, who's ever number 2 or 3 on the list wants their stuff addressed first because they're top of the list.
Right.
But they're oblivious or maybe not as concerned about number 1.
Right.
Because that might not be their area.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of, that's the point of testing. Those things will flesh out when you do tabletop exercises, when you have certain business or application owners requesting certain things and that conflict comes up. Hope to goodness it comes up during the tabletop and not during the real incident or event itself.
Yeah.
And again, just another reason why tabletops or incidents testing, they need to be realistic. They need to be a real type of situation that your business might be involved in. They need to include the functional teams and the people that would be involved in an incident. Something as simple as the right legal people, the right internal and external communication people, If you're going to get something from an OT space, who are you going to get it from? Just making sure all of those things line up. And more importantly, who are you going to notify?
Right.
Do you go to the top of your food chain instantly? Or is there a level that you go regionally, nationally, whatever it might be in your environment? You probably have a order of escalation.
Yeah. Which should be defined in that instant response plan. So
hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully so. Yeah. But as you go through M&A and all the other stuff, you need to make sure you keep updating that stuff. You can't just keep it the same, especially on that communication channel.
Yeah. So M&A is, as I would say, it's a whole unique risk upon itself.
Right.
Just on the fact, typically, once you announce an M&A, they become a attack vector.
Right.
If they weren't before, they are now.
Yeah.
Because that's a point of risk during that transition period.
Yeah.
So, whatever you're doing with that acquisition, typically you're starting with the cyber perspective first and making sure that, your defensive measures, your incident responses, and all of those back-end cyber defenses are in alignment and providing the proper protections.
Yeah.
And then also notifying that new acquisition leadership of their new increased risk by being default of a new acquisition.
Yeah.
That, it's publicly announced, it's going to be in the paper. People are going to go after you. They're going to go after your finance people. They're going to try and, BEC compromise. Hey, we changed your bank account, or, your rent for your property is now changed to a new location.
Yeah.
I mean, we see that all the time across the organization, public announcements,
Yeah.
Threat actors happen.
Yeah. Well, Brian, thank you for all the insights as always, and appreciate you sitting on the Cyber Executive. And for everyone else, be sure to like and share the podcast. And until next time, thank you.
Thank you.